Professor Agnes Callard has written a number of books and articles, and she appears to be quite popular. And there is a video of hers on Aeon magazine. Now, I wonder why her work is so popular or why it is gaining currency. And the fact of the matter is that this is a lady who had extraordinary educational opportunities. The opportunity to learn the sciences and mathematics, the opportunity to learn the great classical languages of Western Paideia, and philosophy doesn't need to be stupid. There is a mathematical, logical aspect to philosophy. So it really is a wonder why she discovers the most stupid type of paradoxes. Let us hear from Agnes Callard.
Than what you're currently responding to. And so, say you take a music appreciation class. Then it looks like there's a kind of paradox about your motivation, right? Because your reason for taking the class is like the intrinsic value of music. That's what you want to appreciate, right? But it's not the intrinsic value insofar as you already do appreciate it. Because, that you've already got, and that's not what you're trying to get, right? What you're trying to get is the bit you don't have, right? So it's sort of the value insofar as you can't yet grasp it. But insofar as you can't yet grasp it, you can't yet grasp it, and it can't motivate you, right? And so it looks like, the thing that should motivate you in taking the class, right, is the thing you're going to get out of it, but that's not a thing you yet have or have access to. Of course, there are other options for why someone might take a classical music class. Like they might do it to impress their friends, right? Or to appear to be a lover of classical music because there are some social rewards for doing that. But those, we wouldn't want to think that those were the only cases, right? We'd want to think that it was possible to take a classical music appreciation class because you actually wanted to come to appreciate classical music, right? And in that sort of a case, it looks like your motivation has to be the intrinsic value of classical music, but it can't be, the reason I just gave. So
why is this foolish? Well, the answer is that Western philosophy made a mistake a long time ago, about 100 years ago, 120 years ago, when it failed to notice that mimetic effects, that people copying other people, that's what drives everything in society. Now, you had people like Gabriel Tard speaking of mimetic effects, but the notion that people would emulate others, it was not controversial. And if you look at what Agnes Callard is saying here, she's essentially saying, you want to appreciate classical music, okay? You don't appreciate it at the moment, or not sufficiently. What do? Well, the very fact that there is a class to appreciate classical music suggests that there is not just a mimetic, but a paideia, which has that outcome. So, what is the paradox that this woman is talking about? If there is a class which says, look, we will instruct you in this, just as there's a class that she took. She took a class in philosophy. That's why she claims to be a philosopher. She took a class in classical languages, so she claims to be a classicist. She took classes in the sciences, and she says, "Oh well, I could have been a physicist, I could have been a mathematician." She's a very well-educated person. But the paradox is that she's as stupid as shit. Why? It's because she sees paradoxes where there are no paradoxes at all. If you take a class, the purpose of that class is to teach you something. If it says classical music appreciation, that's what you're going to get. And there's a mimetic element to it as well. If you see other people going into that class and you see that they come out of it saying, oh, I really appreciate classical music, that's a reinforcement. So mimetics and reinforcement, and also having signposts. If you have a signpost saying, this is a class for this, and you see people queuing up, going into that class, and you see people coming out of that class saying, oh, now we can do this. It's like, you'll see a medical college, and you'll see people going in and saying, I want to be a doctor. I want to be able to operate and cure sick people. And lo and behold, some of them come out, and they do operate and cure sick people and perform surgeries and so forth. So the fact that there is a medical school where you can go to become a doctor, and it is a question of mimetics. Once you go into that school, you have to imitate what other people are doing who are succeeding in that type of instruction. That's it. This is the whole story. But look at the heavy weather that this lady makes of something quite simple. Now, she says that if you attended a class to appreciate classical music, but we could easily say if you attended a course of lectures to appreciate the worthless philosophy, Psilosophy. The word Psilosophy means slender wisdom, and it is appropriate to replace every mention of philosophy that Agnes Callard might make with the word Psilosophy. It is slender wisdom. Look at her. She blinks her eyes, and she's got a wonderful pair of spectacles, and she's very engaging. And she's saying there is a paradox. There is a paradox in that if you join a course to appreciate classical music, there is a paradox because. It's a class to appreciate classical music. Either the class is rubbish, or it's good. And if other people who go into it and they come out of it saying, it worked for me. So you take that class, you end up appreciating classical music. Now she says, no, there's a paradox here, because you want to do something which you can't already do. But this is why we take classes. I can't speak Spanish, and I take a class in Spanish because everybody who takes that class ends up speaking Spanish. Where is the paradox here? Let us hear a little more from this marvelous Psilosopher.
My book is about that paradox. It's about how is it possible to try to come to appreciate something, given that your only reason for doing it has to be the value that you can't yet appreciate. And what I argue is that the reason this looks impossible to us is that there are a bunch of assumptions that we're making in a couple different areas of philosophy, which, if those assumptions were true, it wouldn't be possible to aspire, as I'm understanding it. So they must be false because I think it is possible, right? And so I try to identify those assumptions. So first part of the book is about decision theory, the theory of rationality. And what I argue there is that there are really, I guess, two, let's say, impediments to the theory of aspiration within that part of philosophy. One of them is the idea that all agency is a matter of decision. So in
Okay, so, she's just waffling. She's talking nonsense. Now, decision theory is certainly a part of economics and a part of any other protocol-bound, the law. You have decisions made in law, you have administrative decisions. So decision theory, it's something which is perfectly respectable. But decision theory doesn't have any paradox at all associated with something as simple as wanting to do X and doing what other people who have achieved X have done. That's pure mathematics. It's you do what other people do so as to achieve that same thing. So there is no paradox here at all. And you hear Agnes Callard waffle on. She's saying, "Oh, well, decision theory." She doesn't understand the decision theory. It's what everybody uses, and as with many other things, it is better understood by people who make good decisions. For example, the guys who are rich, who are powerful, who have wonderful lives. It's better understood by them than those who teach the elements of decision theory, which is about statistics and probability and Bayesian methods. And but there is one point as a former teacher I might make, which is that the moment you say decision theory in the real world features something called Knightian uncertainty. This is Frank Knight from 100 years ago. 100 years ago, he said, "Look, unlike physics, where states of the world are known, or they are, well, we don't know them, but the states of the world are absolutely fixed in advance, and probability distributions describe those states of the world. In economics, we have radical uncertainty in the sense that states of the world are dependent upon, are uncertain in the sense that there is no probability distribution which describes them, and moreover, they change. They change by the very purely because we form probability distributions about them. So this is why we have mimetic effects. The thing is that to calculate everything from a substantivist, from a frequentist theory of probability, it's cognitively too costly. So that is why we have mimetic effects. That's why we have reinforcements. That's why we have evolutionary mechanisms whereby actually we're going to get a certain amount of noise. We in our decision making, we are not going to make very good decisions for an excellent reason, which is that in an uncertain world, better than utility maximization, or better than expected utility maximization in arid brew type rationality, better than that is regret minimization, Hainan consistency. It is having learning rules, heuristics, which feature some element of, well, for one thing, catastrophic risks feature, they absolutely change your behavior under regret minimization. And, if we look at what the world is doing now under the COVID virus threat, it is expected utility theory would say, no, we go for herd immunity. Don't be silly. You can't sacrifice 5% of world GDP, and that's a minimum. 5% of world income goes away through using these extreme measures. But it is the regret minimizing, it is the hale and consistent solution to this problem. And it took, certainly it took India and Britain a little bit of time to come to that conclusion. But this is the right way forward, because you say when we want to build administrative capacity to deal with catastrophic risks, and that is regret minimizing. It's not expected utility maximizing, but that's what it is. And there is a clear mimetic drive here. Now, let me return to Agnes Callard for a moment.